Coming back with another video. So we got some updates in regards to the WNBA season potentially being over, man. As we know, they're currently negotiating the CBA agreement, and it looked like time may be running out.
The internet, guys, you all saw the title, so let's just get into it. After a long and frustrating 6-week wait, the WNBA has finally submitted a new collective bargaining proposal.
Something doesn't add up. The WNBA just had its biggest year ever, thanks to Caitlin Clark. Revenue is up, attention is up, everything is trending in the right direction. So why did the league's owners walk into the most important negotiation meeting in 6 weeks completely unprepared? No counter-proposal, no revised offer, not even a timeline for when they'd respond. Meanwhile, reports are leaking about the players' union splitting apart from the inside. Star players pushing for a strike, role players desperate to accept any deal. Either the owners are incompetent or they're executing a deliberate strategy to break the union. And if it's the latter, they might just succeed at the cost of destroying the league's momentum forever. Monday's gathering at WNBA headquarters in New York was supposed to be the breakthrough moment. Union President Nneka Ogwumike organized it specifically so players could sit face-to-face with ownership. Kelsey Plum had publicly stated she wanted this exact scenario, a heart-to-heart conversation where everyone could be transparent about the league's future. But here's what actually transpired. The ownership group volunteered immediately, before anyone even asked, that they arrived without preparation. No documents, no revised terms. Just an acknowledgement that they'd received the players' counterproposal 42 days earlier and hadn't responded. Think about that timeline. 6 full weeks of radio silence, and when they finally agree to meet, their opening statement is essentially, "We'll get back to you later." The visual representation of this meeting tells its own story. On the players' side, Ogwumike, Alicia Clark, Brianna Turner, and Stephanie Dolson attended in person. Kelsey Plum and Brianna Stewart, 2 of the union's most vocal advocates, joined via video call due to alleged travel complications. Approximately 40 additional players listened remotely, demonstrating how seriously the rank-and-file membership is following these developments. Now examine the ownership representation. 4 individuals showed up physically. 4, the Connecticut Sun owner, the Seattle Storm owner, the New York Liberty owner, and 1 other representative. Phoenix Mercury owner Matt Ishbia participated through Zoom. 5 total representatives from a league supposedly fighting to preserve its upcoming season. That's the delegation they sent to what everyone agreed was a pivotal discussion. What the owners are executing here is textbook pressure tactics in labor negotiations. They've placed what they consider their maximum offer on the table: substantial salary increases, charter travel arrangements, enhanced facilities, improved working conditions. Now they're implementing a calculated waiting strategy. Every day without resolution moves closer to the season opener. Every passing week amplifies anxiety among players about whether paychecks will materialize. The ownership group understands that time functions as their ally in this scenario. Why would they negotiate against themselves when their current proposal already works in their favor? Why rush to compromise when internal fractures are beginning to surface within the union? According to ESPN's reporting earlier that same day, the WNBA Players Association's 17-member executive committee is experiencing significant internal debate. The committee has essentially divided into 2 philosophical camps regarding strategy moving forward. One faction believes this represents the definitive moment to demand a completely restructured revenue model. They've been pushing for revenue sharing for years, and they see the league's current growth trajectory as proof they deserve partnership status rather than employee classification. The opposing group is examining the league's offer objectively, the largest financial commitment in WNBA history, and questioning whether holding out justifies the enormous risk involved. Ogwumike and Clark immediately issued public denials of any division. They insisted the union remains completely unified, that everyone stands on identical ground, that no internal conflict exists whatsoever. But ESPN doesn't fabricate these reports randomly. They have sources embedded deep within that executive committee. Someone is communicating information outward. When a major sports outlet reports division and the union's reflexive response is blanket denial, that typically confirms the split is real. They're just desperately trying to prevent it from becoming the dominant narrative. Here's where the situation becomes genuinely complex, because different players exist in radically different economic universes. Breanna Stewart commands multi-million-dollar endorsement contracts. Kelsey Plum has lucrative international deals. Ogwumike has built substantial income streams outside her WNBA salary. These superstars possess genuine financial security. They can afford to miss an entire season if necessary because they've diversified their revenue sources extensively. But what about the majority of roster players? What about athletes earning $75,000 annually who lack shoe deals, who aren't securing massive overseas contracts, who depend entirely on their WNBA paycheck? For those players, this league offer represents more money than they've seen in any professional contract throughout their entire careers. And now they're being asked to potentially sacrifice that because the star players want a better revenue-sharing arrangement. That's precisely where the tension originates. It's not truly about being united or divided on principle. It's about material reality. Different players face vastly different financial pressures depending on their status within the league hierarchy. Let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the people who weren't in the room. Kelsey Plum and Breanna Stewart were supposedly planning to attend this meeting physically. They were expected to be there. These are two of the union's highest-ranking members, two of the most outspoken voices demanding face-to-face dialogue with ownership. And they didn't show up. Flight issues, according to reports. 2 days before one of the most consequential meetings in WNBA history, and two of the union's key figures can't arrange transportation to New York City. Ogwumike made it. Clark appeared. Turner showed up. But the two players who specifically advocated for this exact meeting are calling in from laptop screens. The optics are brutal. It suggests either a lack of commitment or internal disagreement about strategy. Neither interpretation helps the union's negotiating position. According to multiple sources who attended Monday's session, the ownership representatives didn't wait for players to inquire about a counter-proposal. They announced immediately at the meeting's opening that they hadn't prepared anything new. Their message was straightforward. "We don't have a revised offer today. We'll begin working on an official response to your last proposal." Begin working. 6 weeks after receiving that proposal, they're just now beginning to formulate a response. Ogwumike stated this set the entire tone for the conversation, and you can understand why players departed feeling disrespected. Plum specifically said she wanted to get in front of ownership, have a genuine heart-to-heart about the league's future, engage in substantive dialogue. Instead, the owners essentially communicated, "We'll get back to you eventually." That's extraordinarily difficult to accept after organizing this supposedly critical meeting. Let's zoom out and examine what's fundamentally at stake here, because this transcends salaries and revenue percentages now. This is about whether the WNBA's business model can sustain the growth players are demanding. The league's current proposal represents a massive financial commitment. They're offering salary increases that would more than double what most players currently earn. They're committing to charter flights, an enormous operational expense for any sports league. They're upgrading facilities, increasing per diem payments, enhancing benefits across every category. And the players are responding, "That's insufficient. We want a percentage of revenue. We want partnership status in this business, not employee classification," which sounds entirely reasonable in theory. But here's the practical obstacle the owners keep highlighting. The WNBA still isn't consistently profitable. Most franchises actually operate at a loss. The league has been subsidized by the NBA throughout its entire 29-year existence. So when players demand revenue sharing, ownership examines actual financial statements and asks, what revenue are we sharing? The revenue that doesn't exist yet? the projected future revenue that depends on continued growth that isn't guaranteed. This is the core disagreement that makes resolution so difficult. Players observe the new media contracts. They see increased attendance figures. They recognize the cultural momentum building around women's basketball. They witness Caitlin Clark's impact on viewership. They notice arenas selling out. And they conclude, the money is here. We deserve our share. Owners examine balance sheets. They calculate operating costs. They review long-term financial projections. They add up the losses most franchises absorb annually. And they respond, we're already stretching our resources to make this current offer work. We can't commit to financial structures that might bankrupt franchises. Both perspectives contain legitimate validity. Players absolutely deserve to benefit from the growth they're generating through their talent and marketability. Owners can't reasonably commit to economic models that could potentially collapse their franchises. That's why this negotiation is so extraordinarily difficult. It's not simply about dividing a pie. It's about whether the pie is actually large enough to divide the way players are demanding. Alicia Clark stated after Monday's meeting that a strike remains on the table if necessary. She emphasized the players haven't backed away from that threat, but threats only function if the opposing side believes you'll execute them, and increasingly it appears the owners don't believe the players will follow through. They've watched the 48-hour deadline expire without action. They've seen the union extend negotiations instead of walking away. They've observed cracks appearing in player unity through ESPN's reporting about internal debate and division. The ownership group is gambling that when the moment arrives, players won't actually strike. They're betting that financial pressure will overwhelm principle. They're wagering that players without endorsement deals will force the union's hand. They're counting on the desire to play basketball overriding the desire for a perfect contract. And maybe they're correct. Maybe that gamble pays dividends for them. But if they're wrong, if players actually do walk away, the WNBA faces a crisis unlike anything in its history. Consider what a missed season would mean right now, at this specific moment. The league has more momentum than at any point in its existence. Caitlin Clark just completed a record-breaking rookie season that brought millions of new fans. Angel Reese is developing into a star. Television ratings increased dramatically. Arena attendance spiked. League Pass subscriptions multiplied. Major brands are investing in partnerships. The cultural conversation around women's basketball has never been more positive. And the league is considering gambling all of that away? Missing an entire season means losing Clark's sophomore year, losing Reese's continued development, losing every storyline that was supposed to propel the league to unprecedented heights, losing the new fans who just started paying attention, who just purchased tickets, who just bought jerseys. You'd be betraying the audience you spent decades trying to build. That's what makes the ownership strategy so incredibly risky. They might be correct that they can wait out the players, but if they're wrong, the cost of being wrong is catastrophic, and sitting through a 3-hour meeting without bringing any new proposal suggests they're willing to accept that risk. Caitlin Clark recently made comments during an NBC broadcast that gave many people hope this would resolve quickly. She reassured everyone watching that a deal would get done within the next few weeks. She sounded confident, like someone who'd been in conversations and knew which direction things were heading. But here's the critical problem with treating her statement as gospel. Clark isn't at these meetings. She's not in the negotiating room. She's receiving information secondhand exactly like everyone else. What she might be hearing is optimism from veteran players trying to keep everyone calm. What she might be hearing is reassurance from union leadership that doesn't want rookies panicking about whether they'll have jobs this year. That doesn't necessarily mean a deal is actually close to completion. Clark's confidence might be genuine, but it's based on filtered information, not direct knowledge of the negotiation's true status. So where does this leave us right now, today? We're still at the status quo. No deal has been reached. No clear timeline exists for when a deal might happen. No indication suggests either side is prepared to make the kind of compromise that would bridge this enormous gap. The season is supposed to begin in a few months. We don't know if there will be a season to start. Kelsey Plum wanted her heart-to-heart with ownership. She got her 3 hours. But heart-to-hearts only matter if both sides leave understanding each other's position better. Based on reactions from Ogwumike and Clark, that didn't happen. They departed frustrated, feeling disrespected, feeling like ownership isn't taking this seriously enough. Maybe that frustration will strengthen the union's resolve to hold out for what they want. Or maybe it'll accelerate internal pressure to accept the deal that's currently on the table before it gets worse. Time is running out. At some point, someone has to blink. The question is whether it'll be the players who need paychecks or the owners who need a product to sell. And whatever they decide will determine whether we see basketball this year. The WNBA's future isn't being decided by grand strategy or brilliant negotiation. It's being decided by who can afford to wait longer. And right now, nobody's winning.